Today on This Week in Evansville, we have no idea what we're going to talk about because there are so many things that we can talk about with our guest. Brian Buxton is here with us, so stick around for This Week in Evansville. Hi, I'm Johnny Kincaid. Thanks for making some time to join us here. I'm really kind of pumped up about doing this show. Brian Buxton is here, and
I'm not that interesting.
Yes, Brian is on. You have like 3 billion followers on Facebook. And
maybe after this podcast, I might have to cut you a check or something if I get a ton of followers. I may have to take you to dinner or whatever.
Yeah. Well, a dinner experience might not be bad, but so let's see, food and restaurants, big thing for you, animal, finding adoptions for animals.
Those shelters and rescues. I've always been a big supporter of those.
You do some property things.
I do.
And then on top of that,
I used to do cars for years. I don't anymore. But and it's weird too, because like what I went to college for and what I was planning on doing is not anything that I've ever done in my life. I went to Indiana State, and I've actually got a degree in clinical psychology with a philosophy minor of all things. I didn't mean to get a philosophy minor. I just loved philosophy. So I took all the classes, and they're like, hey, you take one more, you got a minor. And I said, okay. And so, but I intended to actually go into private practice with my dad, who was a clinical psychologist here in town, a PhD. He retired a couple of years ago, and I meant to go to, into private practice with him. And then all this other stuff that were sort of hobbies of mine just happened. And they turned into businesses. So I have a weird knack, for doing things like that. I don't know how that works, but I've got a strange history of my life, or whatnot that's happened. And Tom Ashby, was another person that was really good at that too, because he was at Brake Supply forever. And then, he liked to fish, and he started American Legacy Fishing Company, and then he smoked cigars. So he started a cigar company and was like highly, highly successful at both of those. And I always talk to him. I'm like, how did that happen? I said, because my life has been kind of the same way, and I don't really know how to explain it. I said, I really have no idea. So yeah, all that stuff you mentioned, I never, if you'd said when I was 15 or 20 or whatever, what are you going to do with your life? Nothing that I've done is what I actually would have said. But
what you've done is, I refer to it as kind of reinventing yourself from time to time, that you carry something as far as you want to carry it.
Right.
And then you go, okay, it's time for the next adventure. and I can identify with that. Yeah. So I've done that right. myself. But
I was to say, you got a voice for radio. You should be on the radio.
Yeah. One of these days I might think about that.
Yeah. Well, but stuff kind of just happens too. It's not like like I said, it's not like I planned it and I said, okay, well, I'm done with this. Let me go do XYZ. It just sort of was a natural progression, and you meet the right person at the right time, or you have this idea, and then it turns into something else. I don't know. It's kind of strange. It's like, I guess if you are good at what you do, a certain thing, it sort of takes a life of its own. Maybe I don't know.
It's following your passions.
Yeah. That's exactly it.
And then that's so many people go through their lives, just working to get a paycheck. Right. And they just kind of get by, and they live life out, and they're reasonably happy with doing that. But to be able to live your life out focused on your passions in life, and because, for example, with cars, you didn't just say, hey, I like cars, and there are people who you go to the point of, well, I like cars, but I like the old cars, right?
Right.
You said, I like the ultimate cars.
It's, and it's kind of funny because it's, and it all just ties together really. But part of the reason that I probably started my company, honestly, is because of what I grew up with. I mean, I grew up in the 80s, and I watched, and if you think about it, the 80s the shows were cars.
Yeah.
I mean, look, the A-Team, Dukes of Hazzard,
Knight
Rider. You got BJ and the Bear. I don't know if you remember BJ and the Bear.
Oh, yeah.
And then you've got all these movies that were popular back then, like Smokey and the Bandit and Cannonball Run. And then I was a huge Miami Vice fan. And so, of course, on Miami Vice, there was Ferraris and Lamborghinis and Maseratis and Lotus and all this other stuff. And it's kind of like, that influenced me so much. And I went to school to day school also for middle school, high school, everything else. I went there for like 11 or 12 years, I guess. And people had nice cars there. Somebody would get picked up in a Ferrari or a new Corvette or whatever back then. And so honestly, me getting into cars was kind of driven by, I think, a lot of that with what I grew up with, because, like I said, when I graduated college, I was accepted directly into a PhD program. So normally you have to go and get your master's, and that takes 2 or 3 years. And then you have to apply for PhD and you do that. Well, I was on like 3 research teams and, did a bunch of extra stuff in college and honors classes and whatnot. So I actually got into a PhD program directly out of college, and I didn't go. It was one of those weird things where I said, you know what? I'm tired of writing papers. I hated statistics class too. I'm not great at math, but hated statistics. And of course I had to take it. The odd thing is I tested out of math in college. I didn't have to take any math at all. And I was terrible at math in high school. And I don't know how that happened, but one day it just kind of clicked and made sense, I guess. But I was like, I'm going to take a break. And so I had been detailing cars in the summertime in the high school and in college and whatnot for customers. And every once in a while they would say, hey, I want to sell this car. Can you help me? Or, hey, I'd like to find XYZ. And then so I started searching and helping them find things and whatever. And it just snowballed into that. And then a friend of mine that I met because crazy story, but we dated the same girl. When I was 18, I was dating a 29-year-old. And this girl was the girlfriend of a friend of mine who was in the car business. And they had broken up. And so I dated her. And, he had called me up one night and he's like, hey, why don't you come over to my house? I want to talk to you. And he rode motorcycles, with a bunch of guys John Tyrane and a bunch of guys from, way back in the day, the early history of hanging out in Evansville and Harpoles and all that stuff. But I was like, man, this guy's going to beat me up, because I was dating his girlfriend. And we actually became friends. And so he was a wholesaler here in town. And I was like, okay, well, I like cars and let me help you. So I would end up taking cars that he didn't like dealing with the general public. I didn't like dealing with dealers at the time. And I said, well, I'll take some of this stuff that you don't want to wholesale and I'll sell it for you. And then it turned into, I bought a car and resold it and, whatever. And this would be an hour long. I don't want to take all the time up, but this would be an hour long podcast in its own, how I started my dealership. But, it just so happened that I was, we were talking about the blues earlier, and I was at a BB King concert in Cincinnati on my birthday. And, I had a 928 Porsche, like in Weird Science. And so, I came out of the steakhouse and we were getting ready to go to the concert, and somebody had left something on my car. I said, well, crap, I got a parking ticket, downtown Cincinnati, whatever. And it was a note. And this guy said, hey, I've been looking for a car just like this. If you want to sell it, let me know. And so I called him and I said, I don't want to sell my car, but I can find you one just like it, And so at the time, I didn't have my dealer's license yet, but things were progressing with my buddy to where I was getting my own customers and getting trades and whatever. And I was like, okay, I need to, probably do something a little farther beyond what happened. And the trigger for it was an attorney in Madisonville actually cheated me out of a car deal. Like I had found a car that he wanted and got all the information in the records and whatever. And he says, well, I'd really like to talk to the owner to see, just ask questions about the car, see about the history, whatever. Well, I didn't think anything about it. So I give him the guy's number and I don't hear from him for a few days and, whatever. And I call him up and say, hey, how did that conversation go with the guy with the 928? I used to sell a ton of 928s. And so he was like, yeah, well, it just wasn't the car for me, blah, blah, blah. Well, then I had another customer who called up and wanted a 928. And I said, well, I know this guy in wherever it was, Owensboro or whatever. The one guy was in Madisonville. The other guy was in Owensboro. I said, I know about this car. So I called the owner and I said, hey, do you still have that car? I've got somebody else. My other customer didn't work out. And he's like, oh, he said some attorney from Madisonville bought it. And I was like, son of a bee. And so this guy went behind my back and bought the car that I had done all the work on, getting all the pictures and information, whatever. And I said, well, and he paid me, but about half of what he actually owed me. And so long story short, I said, I'm going to get my dealer's license. And to control the cars is the way that I, said, nope, you go through me. I'm going to get the title from this guy. I'm going to reassign it to you. Car's going to go through me, blah, blah, blah. Money's going to go through me. And that didn't happen again. So that was the weird thing about that. But yeah, the car business, and man, I used to love it. I tell you what, I used to absolutely love it. And the last, 3 or 4 years before I quit, I just didn't like it anymore. It was so much work, and the internet, when it first came out, the internet was like the best thing that ever happened to the car business because you could reach everybody in the world,
right?
Versus, kind of like restaurants too, normally people go buy a car, they drive to the lots in town and that's it. And now you're like, hey, there's this car in Seattle, Washington, and it's just what I want. And I can throw it on a truck and bring it here. So it was like the best thing that ever happened. And anymore, there's just so many scammers and so much BS, and whatever. And I just always said when I didn't like it anymore, I'd quit. Yeah. And I honestly, I drug it out about 3 years because it sort of gets in your blood and it's hard to get away from. I mean, it's kind of just putting deals together and whatever is just fun. And that's what transitioned me to property, honestly. But I was like, the closer and closer and closer I got to 25 years, because I've been in the car business probably 35 years, honestly, but 30, mainstream, every day, and then 25 as an actual registered Indiana dealer. And I was like, I'm going to do 25 years. Because I'm just enough OCD like that. And I even told Wolf's, I said, 97 years would bother me for the rest of my life. I said, if I were you, I would have had to have stayed open, Wolf's Barbecue, to say I did 100. Even if you just did carry out the last year, just be open and do 100 years. I said that would bother me on my deathbed. So anyway.
So do you think that you mentioned Wolf's, and I want to switch gears here real quick, but do you think they're going to wind up selling the recipes and the name? And
it's weird that you asked me that, because I had a conversation. Well, there's been a couple of people, honestly, that have PM'd me or, said something in comments on my posts, which I got to put a plug out. Fingers, Fork, Knife, and Spoon. If you don't follow my page, Fingers, Fork, Knife, and Spoon on Facebook. And I'm on Instagram too, but I don't ever post on Instagram. I got to start doing that. I either need to cancel delete the page or start using it. But my problem is I'm more informational with a lot of text, and Instagram is just pictures. So it's hard for me to put all the information that I put on Instagram. So I guess I could say go to Facebook to read the rest of this or whatever. But a couple of people want to get the sauce, buy the sauce from Wolf's. And I said, well, what I would do personally, instead of, giving them whatever they want for it, I'm just throwing a number out, but let's just say they say I want $100,000. Instead of coming out of pocket $100,000, why don't you give them 10 and say, I'll buy this from you on a deal where basically it's kind of like a contract purchase where I'll give you X percentage of all the sales plus $1,000 a month or $5,000 a month or whatever. And then I'll use your name and, everything else. And then after 10 years, we're done, or you get 5 cents of every sale for in perpetuity or, whatever. But I said, I wouldn't put all the money out at first, because the problem is you've got to find somebody to bottle it, to make it first. You got to make it, bottle it, label it, package it, ship it, distribute it to everybody else. And, the Hoople that's doing their macaroni salads and their slaw and their potato salads, I don't think they've got the facility. You just need big assembly lines. And, if you see sriracha or mayonnaise or whatever being made, ketchup on TV, you've got these gigantic factories with all these lines and everything else. Yeah. And I don't know that even exists in Evansville necessarily to do the volume that they would probably do. And then I talked to somebody else who is dating the great grandson, maybe, of the original founder of Wolf's back in the 1800s. And they actually want to buy the concept, since they're related to the family. They want to buy the concept, and they were talking to me about locations to reopen Wolf's, but on a smaller scale, because that building on First Avenue is huge.
It is.
And do a smaller scale and focus more on carry out and, pre-orders, but have indoor seating, but do like a Nashville meet and three, like Walton's tried to, after Walton's International Comfort Food, they tried to go to a meet and three kind of deal because they were having employee problems and they were trying to get away from servers. And where you go in, you order at the counter, you get your own drink, and either a food runner runs the food to your table or you go pick it up at the counter. And then you don't really have a server. You take, if somebody, you need napkins or whatever, you either go get them yourself or somebody might come by and say, I'll refill your drink for you, whatever. But there's no servers. It's just a concept, kind of a serve yourself, self-serve, like you got at wherever fast food where you go up and get your own drink refills and things like that. But they want to reopen that, and they're looking at places on the east side and they're looking at places on the north side. So that might be something that actually happens is Wolf's Barbecue reopens, but just on a lot smaller scale. And I told them, I said, well, good grief, if other people are looking at, if other people are looking at the sauce, why don't you do the sauce too? If you're going to reopen it, and then you can sell it in your store. So yeah, actually that might be a thing. There's no guarantee, but I've had conversations with multiple different people that want to either do the restaurant or the sauce.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
I would think that just that name would just automatically do it.
And you've got the name recognition and the brand recognition, and you've got so many people that, over 100 years, you touch a lot of people, you serve a lot of people food over 100 years. And so, reopening something like that, and same thing. And it's kind of crazy because I can put what I think is interesting anyway. I'll put some interesting post out on my food page and it gets, 50 people comment on it and, whatever. And then I say, hey, like something dumb, like, hey, who misses Sir Beef? And I get 6,000, and I was like, there was a couple of posts like that where the reach and the whatever that Facebook that checks 200,000. And I'm like, there's not 200,000 people in Evansville. The population of Evansville is not that big. I'm like, I'm reaching more, every single person in Evansville plus Newburgh, McCutcheonville, Mount Vernon, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, and it's just the most inane, post. And it's interesting to people. And I understand why they like the history. But I was like, okay, I'm talking about this new cool restaurant that's going to open up. And the most popular post of the month is a roast beef place that's been closed for 20 years. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I was like, cool, let's talk about Sir Beef more. Cause then I get followers and I get comments and whatever. So it's just one of those weird things, but.
Well, and this is Evansville where as soon as a restaurant opens, it's guaranteed that packed factor for,
right.
We're figuring that when Nellie's opens in the old Wolf's location,
that's going to be nuts.
It'll be 2027 before you get a table there.
Well, and the nice thing too, though, is that's a huge restaurant, and I'm actually a little bit worried for them. I love the family; they're awesome. They're awesome people, and they do really well to get food out quickly. But my buddies and we met like the Thursday. I think Friday was a couple Fridays ago was the last service for dine-in. And we went on Thursday and it took us an hour and a half to get seated. We stood in the lobby for almost an hour and a half, about an hour and 20 minutes, I think, to get seated. And I was looking at it and I'm like, this is a gigantic building. And then there's an upstairs loft kind of area. And then you've got this other, I was like, what are they going to do with this? Because to serve, if you seated everybody in that restaurant that could sit down, up and down and everywhere else, you would need 50 servers to take care of everybody. And especially since they don't have a buffet or anything like that. And I'm like, I want to see what they do at the place, because I would almost subdivide it and rent it to somebody to go next door, or whatever. It's like, or do event space upstairs or something like that. But we'll see what happens with it. They think they can do it, and I hope they can. But man, it's a big, big, big building.
It's a big adjustment to go from a place the size of Nellie's now.
Yeah.
And to go to this huge facility,
right?
Because all your systems change.
No, yeah, absolutely. You scale it. You have to scale everything, and they're going to keep their location in Newburgh, but like you're saying, if you seat 100 people in your restaurant, and now you can seat 400 people. How much more, and that's they are redoing the kitchen. So they've got to rebuild the kitchen and make it larger and add some things. But it's like, how many extra cooks do you need? How many extra dishwashers do you need? How much extra, servers and this and that and plates, bowls, the whole thing. It's like, how much extra do you need to support that size of an operation? So,
It's good. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
I would want to do it if I would. There's a couple of restaurants that I probably would like to get involved in eventually, and it'd be such low scale and no huge turnover of tables and stuff like that. It's like you come in here and you're here for the night.
Give me an operation like Lone Star. Then
they're packed, and you see but it's crazy because especially if you look at. And this has been a big problem for all these restaurants. But if you look at just the cost of food, and everybody complains now, and I understand, I go to the grocery and, kind of sigh sometimes too. I'm like, I used to not spend this much money to get the food that I get. But, it costs so much money for these restaurants just to stock inventory. To cook and the ingredients and everything. And I feel bad for them because they have to have it. I mean, it's either clothes or, you pay what it costs to buy lettuce and eggs and blah, blah, blah. But I feel bad for them. It's hard. It's not, the restaurant industry is hard when things are good. And then when things are not good, it's,
and we're all looking at, the price of lunch. I don't care whether you do a drive-through or if you go and sit down, that price of lunch has gone up. It's significantly.
It's crazy. And see, that's why I think it's funny too. And this is this person's probably gonna get mad and unfollow my page. I don't know their name, but the story can only be the person that said this. So I always post about, I used to go to Marigold all the time when Dave Bush owned it and have lunch specials. And I post about Stockwell quite a bit because they've got good food and they support the animal rescues and everything. And so you get comments where they're like, Stockwell used to be $7.50 for lunch. It's $9 now, which is still an absolute steal for what you get for the kind of food. And people are like, oh my gosh, that's so expensive, blah, 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 blah. I made a post about Burger Bank. And they had a BLT that they had advertised for $2.32, a sandwich for $2.32. And they put a picture of it and someone commented, there's not enough bacon. And I was like, oh my, I said, it's $2. I'm like, what do you think you get for, and the crazy thing is that I was at, but that's human nature. And this flips over into, like me helping all these different places and getting calls to help them and whatever. Psychology, restaurants are sales. Honestly, and especially at places like Cork and Cleaver or Kavanaugh's or, Madeline's or whatever. A server is a commissioned salesperson. Their job is not to bring you food. It's to sell you food. Buy the wine, buy the bourbon before dinner, the after dinner drink, the extra appetizers, the salad, the entrees with extra sides and blah, blah, blah. Because the more that you spend at the restaurant, the higher their tip. If you tip, if you're a good tipper, the higher their tip theoretically is going to be. And so, I have all these crazy ideas that I tell people and they think I'm nuts, when I say stuff like this. But, I'm like, a restaurant is not really about the food. And people look at me weird when I say that, but here's why I say this. And I'm going to get back to the food prices too, because I got a story about McDonald's that I want to tell you. So remind me that if I get off track. I do this all the time on my live. I'm like squirrel and start thinking about something else. But I tell people that have restaurants, I'm like, your focus should not be your food initially. I said, you need to get your name out there. You need to get known. You need people to want to come to your restaurant for other reasons. And here's why I say that, because if you open up Johnny's hot dogs, hot dog stand or whatever, and I've never eaten your food's not going to make me come to your restaurant because I don't know what it tastes like. Right. A picture of your food might make me come to your restaurant, but but it's not, the food is important and you have to have, good quality food in my opinion. And it has to be fresh. You need to make it quickly because that's what a lot of these places run into. But really food in running a restaurant is 10% of success because it's a business. And that's where a lot of people, go off the rails. There's 110 food trucks in town right now. And in my opinion, a lot of people, I think, believe that, hey man, I'm a good home cook. I can barbecue at home. I can do this. I can do that. Or they're really good at catering, which is making a set amount of food at once for a number of people. Restaurant, you got 50 people coming in at different times. They all order different stuff, blah, blah, blah. And so I think people think that you just buy food, cook it, and people just come and throw money at you, and then you go home rich. And that, and it's not what it is. I mean, you literally have to understand food costs. You have to understand your overhead. You have to be good at dealing with the public. You have to be good at dealing with your employees and scheduling and, planning how much food to have and how much to order. And do you have enough money and, marketing and advertising. And that's the 90%. Right. A restaurant's a business. And I tell the rescues the same thing. I'm like, your first priority and your job really is not to save animals. It's to raise money, because you can't do anything for the animals unless you can pay the vet bills and buy the medicine and buy the food and blah, 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 or you get it donated, but you still have to pay rent. You've got cleaning supplies. You've got all this. And I'm like, your job is to fundraise. Then you save animals as a byproduct of having money. And with the restaurants, the byproduct is good food. Of running a successful, well-run business, you've got good food priced properly that makes people want to come back. That's the byproduct of your business, is you're feeding people that want to come back and get fed again. But if you don't understand, and same thing, I mean, there's a couple of places, I'll mention Incas. Love the family. They are wonderful people. Had absolutely no idea how to run a restaurant. And Amy Bloom and I went there the first time they were open. Took us an hour and a half to get our food, because they want to make everything fresh, everything to order, blah, blah. And I was like, you cannot do that. I said, especially if you do lunch or breakfast, people have to travel to you. They've got a set amount of time to get food and eat it and then go back to work. And if you can't get lunch out, another Los Alforos, I absolutely love Pedro and his wife, Teresa. But Buddy and I went for lunch when they were on Weinbach, and it took an hour to get lunch. And I'm like, the average person that has somewhere to go, we didn't have anything to do that day, so it was no big deal. We talked. But I'm like, the average person can't sit there and wait an hour for lunch. You've got to get it to them in 10 minutes or less, which means you got to prep. You have to have things prepared. If it's rice, the rice needs to be done. You can't cook rice. You can grill chicken in 5 minutes, but you can't make rice. And, and so the 90% of a business doesn't have anything to do with food. And there are places like Incas and like Los Alfaros and all these others that served wonderful food, just delicious food, and failed because they couldn't run a business properly. And there's places that serve trash. Yeah. And people just throw money at them, and there's lines out the door and, just whatever. And the food's not good, but they know how to market and advertise and get people to come in, and people see a value in it, because people are complaining right now that Golden Corral has gone to like $21 or $22 for the buffet. And I'm like, good grief. Yeah. You can go back 7 times and get ribs and spaghetti and all this other crap for $22. Yeah. And that brings me back to the thing. So, the McDonald's story, I mean, Stockwell, I'll go to Stockwell, and, I think Robin likes me a little bit, so I'll get maybe some extra spaghetti or, bigger piece of meatloaf or whatever. But for $9, good Lord, it's a phenomenal meal. Some of them come with a salad and everything else. Right. I was at Barnes & Noble getting some Christmas presents this year. Homeless guy was outside, and with his cart and all that. I had my dog with me. I had Riley with me. So he petted the dog and talked to me and whatever. And I was like, we got to go have a nice, Christmas or whatnot. And I get in my truck and I'm like, I should probably see if this guy needs something. I was like, I can't just leave. And so I went back and I said, hey, do you need anything? Are you hungry? Can I get you something? Whatever. So I ended up, I said, McDonald's is right across the street. I said, I'll go get you whatever you want. So I get him a quarter pounder with cheese meal and 2 cheeseburgers. And it was $21. Yeah. And I'm like, I can go to Stockwell for $9 and get a beer with it too for $14 or whatever, and get spaghetti and meatloaf and blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, it's expensive. And people don't understand either, because, they're like, well, God, why is this so expensive? And I said, well, are you going to the grocery and getting eggs for any less? I'm like, where do you get your product? Because I'm sure the restaurants would love to buy it from your distributor, Yeah, exactly. Because they're getting killed by the food prices. And I'm like, it's just what it costs, and I'm like, you're also paying, well, I can make that at home. And I said, sure you can. I was like, but if you go to, just to use Quirk and Cleaver as an example, or Madeline's, you go to Madeline's, do you have the wine list that Madeline's has at your house? And do you have someone literally, like, you just look at a piece of paper and someone brings you what you choose off that piece of paper 15 or 20 minutes later? You don't have to clean up. You don't have to, do anything at all. And you can, because going out to eat, it's not just, I can make this at home. I can cook a steak at home.
Exactly.
Sure you can. But it's about the people that you're with and interacting and talking and the ambiance and enjoying being out around other people and doing things and meeting people and whatever. That's part of what going to a restaurant is. It's not just getting food and taking off and, whatever. And I'm like, you don't have that at home. And I said, plus, like Cork and Cleaver's got a nice bar and they've got a pretty nice wine list. It's like if I go to Domo, because I love Marvin. And I've been seeing Marvin for food ever since he was at Kabuki, where Mike's Car Wash is on Green River Road now. That was before Iwataya and everything else. But he's been making sushi for me for, I don't even know how long that is, 30 years, something like that. Crazy. In order for me to prepare at home what I go to Domo and order, I would have to buy $700 of fish. And then I got to know how to cut it. And then I got to know how to do this and do that. And, whatever. And it's like, I just want to go to Domo and order it and have it show up looking real pretty and, whatever, because a lot of that stuff, you can't do that at home.
Right.
Or if I want to enjoy, if I'm at Madeline's and I want to get a glass of Pappy Van Winkle. Well, do I buy the $2,000 bottle?
Right.
To have at home so I can drink that one glass with my steak, or do I just go to Madeline's and give them 150 and forget about it?
Right.
So that's the thing. It's, people are like, I can do that better here. Yeah, sure you can. But that's like saying I can build a car in my garage easier than General Motors can. No, you can't.
And dining out's an experience. That's the whole thing. It's like, going to Ed DeBevick's, in Chicago or in LA, where, their shtick is they're going to insult you.
Yeah.
And they're going to, but they put on a show. And
some people might get that at home, though. They might get insulted at home. So.
Yeah. But there's more to it. Or what was the name of the restaurant?
It's a social activity.
Yeah.
And it's something, because I've said that too. It's like, if you think about all the important things in your life that happen, what do people normally do? They go out to eat.
Yeah.
You graduate high school, college, you go out to eat. Someone dies after the funeral. Everybody gets together and goes and eats something. You have a business meeting. Well, let's go to lunch instead. You go on a date. Most people go out to dinner, or whatever. Exactly. So there's a whole social aspect of it too. And like I said, being out and seeing people. I mean, I've been to, my dad told me one time, he's like, well, how much money would you have if you had everything you spent at the bars and the restaurants and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, I wouldn't have also met all the people that I met. I wouldn't have done the business deals that I've done, whatever. I was like, I went to Bar Louie and I didn't even want to go, but for some reason, a buddy wanted to, meet. I'm like, okay, I'll get up and go. Well, I see Bob Taylor from iMart there. And Bob Taylor's like, I'm looking for a Ford GT. This was back in the mid 2000s. And I was like, I can get you a Ford GT. And I literally sold him back then, whatever they were, $250,000 car, because I decided to get up and go to Bar Louie and have a beer with my buddy. And I was like, if I hadn't gone there and stayed at home, yes, I would have had this $25 that I spent or whatever I spent that day. But Bob was a really good customer. I sold him a ton of cars, and I was like, it was well worth me going to Bar Louie. And no, I don't want that money back. I don't want the $100 I spent or whatever my bill was. I don't want that back. Because I'm still friends with Bob. So there's a lot more that comes out of it than just getting food. And some people miss that, I think.
Well, so the price thing is one of the areas where you hear people whining because inflation.
Yes.
All right. Now, dare I open
We're not going to get into
worms?
Politics.
No.
I know that's one thing I try to do on my food page. I never talk about politics because I piss a lot of people off.
Oh, yeah.
I lean to the conservative side, and I'm very opinionated. So I'm one of those people where you probably don't want to hear what I have to say.
Oh, I do.
Unless you're open-minded. That's the thing is there's a lot of people that are not open-minded and they just want to fight and they get insulted. Yeah. And I'm like, that's not the point of this.
No, but this is actually, and I think I've seen more of this topic popping up recently than I can ever remember in the past, and that's tipping. My wife and I went to Italy last year and loved the fact that you don't have to tip. Yeah. You leave a few coins if you feel like it. Now they do commonly put a service charge on your bill. But I know I saw a thread recently where somebody was talking about the restaurant automatically adding the tip on, even with a smaller party.
I think it was my friend Manny. Monamala is her name. And I think she's the one that posted that because there was like 5 people in their party and they added 18% or whatever on there. So I saw that too. But it's funny that you bring that up because you must have been doing your research because that's like huge. Like right now, if you look at eater, .com or on Facebook or whatever, and all these other food sites, tipping is huge right now. There's all these, do I tip at Starbucks? Do I tip the waiter? Do I tip the doorman? Do I tip, whoever? And there's a lot of controversy on it right now also, because it's one of those things that really divides people where, and I'm going to give you this might be a little bit of a long conversation, so I don't know if I'm going to give you a weird aspect of it, because and see, my thing is, I'm on the side of the restaurants normally if you bring something up, and it's not because, I'm friends with Randy Hobson or, whoever. It's because I understand it. I mean, literally, I think really technically the only job that I've ever had was Evansville Living, was writing for Evansville Living. And I didn't even submit a resume. They were just like, why don't you write for us? And I'm like, okay. And I technically kind of got fired from there, I guess, but I've never had a job. I have always worked for myself. Yeah. I was 11 years old, and my family used to own Opus One Music. And there used to be an Apple store next to Opus One Music. Actually, we did used to have an Apple store. And so one of the weird things, I'd ride my bike around there and, whatever after school and on weekends and work there sometimes. And I noticed that, North Park, there's a bunch of windows there. And I started a window washing business. And so, at 11. And so I was 11 years old. And ever since then, I've literally always worked for myself. And, and so I understand it. And I understand what it takes to run a small business. I understand, just all the aspects of it. And it gives me a little more empathy towards the restaurant owners and the business owners than the people, because I've seen, and I said this on my Facebook Live, on the Sunday sit down on Sunday, I've seen like really, really disappointing human nature aspects, and this is what I said I said, when you work in rescue with animals or you work in the restaurant business, it almost makes you hate people. And then not everybody, obviously, but you see some of the worst behavior and the most disgusting, rude things said to people. And it's like, what is wrong with you? It's like, this is a person just like you. This is an animal that's defenseless. What are you doing? Why do you look at this and think this is okay? Or why do you sit because I had posted that too, that there's people that I won't go out to eat with anymore just because they're just horrible to servers, and they constantly got to, no matter where it is, they've got a problem. And I'm like, if you can go to 10 restaurants and find a problem with the service and the food, the common denominator is you. And it's not the restaurant. It's you. You are I can't curse. Sorry. You're a bad patron is what you are. It's not the restaurant's fault. It is you, because, and so, I understand that aspect of it. And so, the weird thing about tipping is everybody wants to compare that to Europe, but nothing in Europe functions the same way that it does in the United States. And people say that, they're like, oh, we should have Canada's healthcare system. And it's like, well, it wouldn't work in the United States because it's not, and then people from Canada say, no, you don't want our healthcare system. It's terrible. But, but same thing with food. People say, well, servers should get a living wage. They don't want it. That's the crazy thing, is that that has been tried. And one of the very few places, there have been a few restaurants that have made the no tipping model work. And one of them was Charlie Trotter's in Chicago. But Charlie Trotter paid all his staff about $75,000 a year because he didn't want any turnover. He wanted everybody to know their job and stay there and whatever. But they added a gigantic gratuity onto the bill that made him able to pay those sorts of wages. And it was one of the restaurants that, I don't know if you ever got to eat there or not, but I mean, it's like, if you have a top 20 list of restaurants in the nation or the world, probably for Trotter's has been closed for quite a while, but at the time, Charlie Trotter's was on like Alinea in Chicago. Any list about Chicago, Alinea is on the top of it, and Charlie Trotter's was always number 2 or 3 or whatever. So if you have a list of all these, great restaurants all over the country or the world, Charlie Trotter's was on it. So they had the bills. People didn't go there to spend $20. Right. So they had the money to do that. But for the most part, everywhere, and I've got I'd get into conversations on people with Facebook, and I was like, I got links. I got news stories about this that I can post and show you. The no tipping model does not work in the United States because people don't like it. It raises the cost of food too much. And here's psychology. Like I said, I think everybody that owns a business or especially has a restaurant should have to take some psychology classes or should voluntarily take some psychology classes because you have to understand human nature. And if you sold a $20 hamburger, people would not buy that hamburger because they perceive it as too expensive. But if you sell a $12 hamburger with some fries and with a Coke included and with this and that, and then you tip and it ends up being $20, that's perceived value for people.
Right.
Because it's not a $20 hamburger, it's a $12 hamburger with a lot of extra stuff and a tip. And so, it didn't make any sense, because $20 is $20 and you get the same food and, whatnot. But people don't like the no tipping model. Servers don't like the no tipping model because it limits what they can earn.
Right.
Why would I take a job and say, I'm going to work for $25,000 a year when just about any server in town, and especially at certain places, I know servers that have worked at high-end places here in town that made $75,000 a year. Why would you take a job and say, I'm going to take a guaranteed $25,000 when you could make 34 or 38 or 29? I mean, just whatever. You can make more money not being paid by the hour or as a salary. Unless you're a manager or something like that, that's different. But servers and bartenders, they do not want the no tipping model because it limits what they earn. It literally, and it also, it's sort of, it encourages laziness a little bit because if there's two servers and this one sits on her phone all day and texts her friends and screws around, doesn't want to work on Christmas, doesn't want to stay late on a Friday night, doesn't want to do this, doesn't want to do that, why would this person do all of those things and make the same amount of money?
Right.
Everybody would do the bare minimum. They would do the very least that they needed to do to make $25,000 and nothing more. Whereas if you say, hey, you can work Christmas Eve or you can work, New Year's or you can work this or that or the other, and you can, go home with $800, they're going to bust their butt and they're going to understand wine. They're going to understand wine and food pairings. They're going to understand alcohol, how to talk to you about bourbon and scotch and sherry and port and whatever else. They're going to learn. And they're going to make more money because they have that knowledge than the person that doesn't. So, that's the thing too, is it's like if you encourage everybody, to make the same amount of money, there's people that do less. And then there's people that are going to realize, it's like that thing that you've seen online where every student gets the same grade and all of a sudden that half the class doesn't do crap and the smart kids that care do all the work. And then finally they say, well, why are we doing all this work? Because we got the same grade. And then nobody does anything. That's what happens. I mean, that's literally what happens.
But I think that part of what happened on the tipping scene in recent years, when COVID rolled around, then all of a sudden there was a tip added onto your on everything.
Right.
I mean, or a recommended tip, and so I'm getting counter service at a pizza place where I'd phoned in my order and I got to pick it up and they want a tip, and and I think that's where, and even when the service sucks, that tip is anticipated, right?
No, yeah,
and I'm going to the wrong places because I'm going to a lot of places where the service sucks, and I don't want to give
right,
and 18% or 20%.
No, and so you don't in those situations you don't. And this was actually the topic of my Sunday sit down. I mean, so you guys could go watch my Facebook Live I do every Sunday night at like 8:00. And no, you shouldn't, because tipping should not just be, and actually I had a real interesting kind of back and forth with one of my page followers in private message about this. Tipping shouldn't just be the bill. Just like the speed limit, it's a suggestion. 55 miles an hour, if you're driving a Ferrari when the sun's out and the street's dry and there's nobody else around, probably is a little too slow technically. So, I mean, there's my car person coming in and my, anti-authority. But 55 miles an hour with ice on the roads in a snowstorm, it's too fast. So 55 is not what you have to drive. It's the suggestion, and you have to use your intelligence based on the situation and the circumstances to make it make sense. and tipping is the same way. If you have a serious problem with your service, or if the food's terrible, and that gets into a different thing because your server doesn't cook the food. A lot of people punish their servers. They're like, my soup was salty and my steak was terrible and blah, blah, blah. I'm not tipping my server. Well, your server didn't cook the food. That's when you talk to the manager and you say, hey, there's a problem with the kitchen, blah, blah, blah. Here's what it is. But in my opinion, and this is what I put on my live, there's no other industry where people can screw up one time. They can do things right 99 times. And the one time that you screw up is what you're judged by. Yeah. I mean, if you work as a secretary and you make a typo, no one gets online and says, oh God, I got this contract and this dummy's, misspelled, perception or, whatever the word is, and shame everybody online and complain. And I'm never using this company again. And, blah, 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 because of a typo. Right. People are human. I mean, people have bad days, and same thing. I said, maybe your server doesn't feel good. Maybe her kid's sick and she's worried about it. Maybe she's got an exam later that night and she's nervous and she's not thinking about her job. Maybe she's tired. Maybe somebody in her family just died. I mean, just whatever it is that gives you an off day. And people deserve to have an off day because none of you are 100% perfect at your job 100% of the time. Sure. But restaurants, for some reason, get judged that way, and that's just so unfair. And it's like, there's a human factor too. So it's like, why don't you reach out to the server and say, hey, is something wrong? Are you okay? Is there anything I can help you with? I mean, give her an extra $10. Maybe that helps her make her car payment that she's worried about, or, buy food or just whatever it is. But there's a human aspect of it too, that you have to really consider and be aware of, and yourself be a decent human being and not be so judgmental and so harsh and, whatever else, and just see them as a person. They're not a robot that's programmed to more butter, more water. That's not what it's about. Right. They're not your they're not your slaves. They're servers, and they do want you to have a good experience. They do want you to spend money. They do want you to have fun, whatever, but they don't want you to treat them like a dog either. That's not, you don't do that to anybody. But the tipping, I would say if you got bad service, talk to your server, talk to the manager and say, hey, I don't know what's going on, but service is really slow. My water hasn't gotten refilled, whatever. And if the person is really that bad, ask for someone else the next time you go back. I would never, I love the Cork and Cleaver, and I've had really, really, really good servers, and I've had servers that were okay. Nothing special, but they did what they needed to do. But I've had some that just were above and beyond. If I got the decent server, when I go in, if I go in tomorrow night or whatever, I'm not ever going to not go back to the Cork because my service wasn't what it was with this person. Ask for that person. Go in and say, I want to sit in this person's section. They were great. I really like them. I enjoy them, blah, blah, blah. But you don't not go back to the restaurant because of one person, because I've told people too, if that person is that bad, they're not going to be there. Very long. They're not going to work out. And I've had people, like I'll post something about a restaurant and they're like, yeah, the last time I went there, man, it was just terrible. And blah, blah, blah. Well, when was that? Oh, 11 years ago. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, well, the same cook's probably not there. The same server is definitely not there. I was like, why would you not go back to a restaurant because 11 years ago you had a bad experience? I'm like, that gets into the, bang my head on a table thing or against a brick wall. But no, you don't have to tip just on the bill. If they're not great, explain why, tell them, hey, I just didn't have a great experience and I'm leaving you a little less or whatever. Or if they're phenomenal, tip more than 20%, and whatever. But some of that stuff, and I guess we could get a list, and I almost thought about doing that too for the second part of that talk that I could have about it, is like, who do you tip? To me, it's like, a service. You tip a service, and they're like, well, your garbage collector is providing a service and this person's providing a service and McDonald's is providing a service. And I'm like, well, those people get salaries. They're either paid by the hour or they get a salary. They make a lot more than servers. And then they want to argue that, well, servers should get a living wage. They don't want it. That's the thing. They don't want it. And then you can get into a whole conversation about what's a living wage because, $20 an hour in California and $20 an hour in Evansville, Indiana is two totally different amounts of money. Yeah. And so but that's a whole other, that could be a whole deal on its own. But, do people tip the girls that do their nails? Yes. Do people tip doormen? Yeah. Do you tip a valet? Sure. Do you tip the bellhop at a hotel that brings your luggage to the room? Sure you do. Do you tip at McDonald's? No. Do you tip at Starbucks? You can, but they make pretty good money at Starbucks, and so you could tip your baristas if you like them or whatever. But there's other places where I don't think you tip on a lot of stuff. But certain people do, if they like their mail lady or mailman, they'll buy them something for Christmas, or they'll find out when their birthday is and give them a little present or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with that. But no, everywhere you go, you don't have to leave a tip. But there's certain things that are just sort of societal norms and just kind of like what has been going on forever. And doesn't mean it has to continue. That can change. But, there's certain things where I'd say, yeah, you give, if you go to a hotel and your concierge gets you tickets to a really good concert, yes, you tip that person, and not that they don't get paid well to be the concierge, but they're going above and beyond. I leave money for hotel staff. For the girls that clean the room, because they don't make a lot of money, for the most part, and people are disgusting and nasty, and I'm not. So, I'll like literally pile up my towels. I'll dust things off if it's dirty or whatever, clean up the sink at the in the bathroom, but I'll tip them for that because they do hard work. It's not fun work, and just being a decent human being, things are hard right now, so this may sound weird too, but it's like if you can't afford to leave somebody $5 or $10 when you go out to eat, or if me leaving $10 or $15 at the hotel that I've been in for a week kills me, then I don't need to go out to eat and I don't need to be traveling. If I can't afford that, you have to factor that in, because other people, what you're going through, if you say, man, I can't spend this money on this tip, the servers are going through the same thing. It's not like they're millionaires and they're serving waiting tables because they love it. They're in the same position you are. So maybe if you have $20 to spend, don't order, the $22 meal, order the $10 meal and then leave them $5, or whatever, just to be courteous and considerate and, whatnot. And when people say that, they take it the wrong way. Well, if you can't afford to do this, you shouldn't do it. But, if you make $50,000 a year, should you be considering buying a Rolls Royce or a Toyota Camry?
Right.
Well, probably the Toyota. And it's just kind of logic, It's like just live within your means and consider other people that, hey, maybe this person might need the $5 even more than I do. And
what we started doing was we've done this for a long time, Jill and I, when we go out and the service is exceptional. There are two paths that we take there. One is to write a note on the receipt saying, leave a nice tip and just a really nice note. First time we did that was in a little restaurant. We were somewhere in central Indiana, and we had talked at a high school that day. And the experience was at the high school was horrible. It was an assembly with about 1,000 kids, and it was just total chaos. And so we went to this rent, go out and, kind of take care of our wounds that night, a little family-run Italian place. And the girl that waited on us was one of the high school students. And she apologized to us for the behavior of her fellow students.
Well, that's nice.
But she provided excellent service.
Right.
So we wrote a little note on the bill, and we left and looked through the window of the restaurant, and we could see her with all of the other staff.
Oh, that she showed them
showing the note, and that sold us on that.
Right. And see that's something interesting too, because I totally agree with you. And I've done things like where I'll leave a tip that's appropriate, but I'll carry like a gas card from Thornton's for $15 or whatever, and I'll leave that too. Or I've known people, and I've done this before, where I'll write a little note out and carry stationery with me, or just a little letter in an envelope or a card. Go to Dollar General and buy 50 thank you, cards for $1 a piece or 50 cents a piece or whatever, and carry them around with you. You have your wife put them in her purse, you carry them in, and just say, hey, I really had a nice experience. I hope you have a good day. And that alone can really make somebody's day, just to be acknowledged or smiled at or complimented, or whatever. And, and that goes to the same thing, where you don't know necessarily what somebody's going through. So if you do just a little bit extra for people, it can really make a huge difference just in the human experience and humanity and, whatnot. So, and
the other thing that we do that just absolutely blows their mind when we do it is after all is said and done, we get our bill before we sign off on the bill. Can I speak to a manager?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And they get kind of flushed because they're going,
like, oh,
the
no.
only time anybody asks for a manager is because there's been a problem.
No,
What's wrong,
and that,
right. And they go and they get the manager, and the manager comes back, and with that server still standing there, we'll talk to the manager about what great service we got.
No, and that is a phenomenal point, and it's actually one that I was going to make, and then I forgot it because I was talking about the other stuff, but you brought it back. That is one thing that you can really do, and this goes for Facebook pages, for people's businesses or whatever. Is one, don't just put something online when you have a bad experience,
right?
Or don't say something just when it's bad, because that's what everybody does. I mean, literally, I will go and I eat Taco Bell, Taco John's. I had it growing up when I used to ride my bike to North Park to get Taco John's, when I was like 12, 14 years old. But everybody complains, but no one says anything good. And so literally, if I go through a drive-through and the person is just like really pleasant or really funny or whatever, I take that receipt and I get online and give them, because you can go to their, McDonald's.com
right.
or TacoBell.org or whatever it is, and leave them a positive review or whatever. And I've even written the managers at restaurants letters and mailed them later, because that's one of the things my grandmother taught me is nobody writes anything anymore. Everybody's like, send a text, send an email, whatever, send a thank you. I love to send handwritten thank you notes, handwritten birthday cards, whatever. But I'll write a letter to the manager and I'm like, hey, Jill at the drive-in was just so nice and so, thankful that I was there buying food, just whatever it is, and just leave a really nice compliment for them. That can make people get, why can't I think of what I want to say? A raise,
right?
Or take a different position in the take a different position.
Well,
in the company,
and wouldn't
or whatever.
you love to be the next person that they wait on?
Yeah, because they're like, oh my gosh, yeah, and it makes them, it makes people happy, or whatever. But yeah, do that also. There's nothing wrong with writing a letter and just saying I really had a good experience, and no one does that anymore. Everybody's just like, oh, it sucked. I hated it. She was terrible. But you should close. You guys suck. Whatever. You go run a restaurant. I'd love to come to your restaurant and see, what you do with it. But no, that's a great point. Is don't just complain. Be positive also, and that floats into what I tell a lot of people about the restaurants. I'm like, go leave them a review if they have the reviews turned on their Facebook page or on Yelp or on Open Table or whatever. Write something positive about the restaurant and leave them a good review, or invite your friends to like that page. And that helps them because it gets more followers and all that, and it's a positive thing. Say, I had a really good experience there. I'm going to let everybody know on my Facebook that I'm going to take a picture of my hamburger and say, God, this was great. Everybody needs to go try it. And I'm going to give you a positive 5-star, 4-star, whatever it is on Facebook on your page. And that helps, that helps too. And then I'm going to invite all my friends list to like your page.
So for everybody watching right now, be sure that you leave a positive review.
That's right.
Of this episode. And
that's exactly right.
And
get on there and say, we loved it. This was the best. See, do you get prizes? Like if I get the most viewers and the highest ratings, which everybody's probably going to get on and just complain about me probably, but if I get the most, I need like a medal that I can wear. It's like
we'll come up with
Johnny Kincaid's podcast. I was the best, and
we'll work on that. That's a great idea.
Yeah. How long have we gone? Have we gone too long?
We've gone about an hour. So yeah.
All right.
Time flies when you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's the way that works.
Well, we got a ton more to talk about. So we need to, so people can vote too. Should we do a part 2 or part 3?
We'll do some future shows.
You got notes that we didn't even talk about.
I've got notes that, that we didn't even, I was going to talk about new restaurant happenings in town, and we didn't even.
Watch my page.
Yeah, there you go.
Because it's crazy too. There's some things, and I know we're going over, but there's some things that I know about that I can't mention in public yet because I've been asked not to, or it's not a definite, or whatever. But if you watch my page, I always post, as soon as I know about something, openings, new places, changes of ownership, whatever, follow that. And you'll kind of keep up with, with the news. Cause I collaborate too, like Amy Bloom. I love Amy and I work with Amy. So if she knows something that she hears, she'll tell me about it. Or if I know something, I'll tell her about it. And then we do our research and end up finding out, a lot more than if we were just doing it on our own. So yeah, just watch Fingers, Fork, Knife and Spoon, check it out on Facebook and,
We'll have the link in the show notes so that you can find it there. And be sure that you just keep clicking on that like button just over and over and over again. Yeah. Don't do the thumbs down now. Thumbs up. That's what we want. All right. And then of course, subscribe. That's the other thing, because without subscribe, you subscribe, then you're in the know on what's coming up for future episodes. You won't miss out on anything that way. You don't want to become the person who doesn't know about things.
Get a card. Can you do a card? And people could be in the cool kids club. Uh-huh. And if you join and, do whatever, Johnny sends you a card to,
there you go.
You're in a special club about the podcast.
Yes. We'll make it our secret. We
That's
won't
right.
tell
Nobody
anybody.
else will know.
Yes. So thanks for joining us. Be sure to check us out next time around here on This Week in Evansville.